So let's take a look at how to repair damage to a container flap. On this piece of fabric, I'm going to put 3 different levels of damage. The first one is just a straight slash. The second one is a slash with a little bite taken out of it. And the third one is a bigger gash than that with a bigger piece missing. First thing we're going to do is sear the edges with a lighter and cut off any excess strands that are still sticking out from them. You're going to want to sear it on both sides just to make sure you can stop it from fraying. On the back side of the material now, mark the damage areas with a pencil so that it's easier for us to see them as we're working with a transparent ruler later on. Now on the back side of the fabric, you're going to want to mark in this case, the simple slash, so that you can line up a piece of tape or webbing or whatever you can find around your shop later on. In this case, I'm going to start between a 1/2 inch and 1 inch before the slash and go about the same distance after, and I'll be using 1 inch tape, so that's a total of 1 inch wide. I'll now cut a piece of, in this case, 1 inch type 3 tape, and I'll cut it at 3 inches long. I'll just scissor cut it and then sear the edges with a lighter. I prefer to do that as cutting it with a hot knife gives you a very hard plasticized edge. To take some hot glue now, place it onto your webbing or tape, whatever you're using, and then mount this on the back side, that is the inside of the fabric. And then just smooth it out just so that it makes a good adhesion to the flap. Now on a straight stitch machine, sew around the webbing or tape, staying as close to the edge as possible to reduce the tape's tendency to lip. Next, on a zigzag machine, you're going to want to sew over it and make sure that the damage is contained within the boundary of the zigzag. Start about 1/3 of an inch before the gash and go about 1/3 of an inch after. And that's it for this level of repair. On to the next one. So we start out the same way on this patch as we did on the last one, by marking all the way around it and making sure we're about a 1/2 inch bigger on each dimension or a little more. We'll then place some hot glue and we'll mount a piece of tape over the damaged area. Same as before, I'm not going to do any fold unders as that just creates a bulkier edge to catch on things. Next thing we're going to do, same as before again, is sew all the way around it. And as I said, caution to make sure that you want to stay as close to the outside as you can when you sew this on. If you're too far in, it's just going to cause a tendency for it to lip. And same as before, we're going to zigzag over the damaged area, making sure the zigzag is wide enough to capture each edge of the damage. Now with this having a larger piece taken out of it, it does give the possibility that the flap could be grabbed or snagged. So I'm going to cover the hole using another piece of material, in this case 1.5 inch type 3 tape. And I'm going to put my lineups now bigger than the original sewing so we don't see any of that. And I've cut this at 5 inches with a mark 1 inch in from each edge, and I'm going to hot glue it and fold to those marks. That'll give me a finished length of about 4 inches. Now mount the folded tape to the flap using hot glue. Now sew the piece of tape down to the outside of the flap, again staying as close to the edge as you are capable of doing. And finally for our larger hole, all the same steps as before for the start. So we're going to mark around it, we're going to cut a piece of tape, in this case 1.5 inches wide, and we're going to mount it using hot glue. Then we're just going to sew all the way around it as usual. And then we can flip it over and zigzag. This time you'll notice we go all the way around without just being able to do it in one straight shot. I've got a shot missing here where I drew a 4 inch square on the outside flap. Then I take a piece of the same material and I mark a 5 inch square with a 3 inch square on the inside of it. Hope that's not getting too confusing. Cut that out, and cut also about a 45-degree easement on each corner just to make it fold easier without being as bulky. Then take some double-sided tape and mount that down the 3-inch lines. Peel the backing off the double-sided tape and then fold the cut edge of the patch to the 3-inch line. Don't worry if it's still a little bulky in the corners. We'll take care of that when we sew it onto the container flap. Take the patch piece, mount it to the outside flap, and pay attention to the grain of the material so you can match it up. Once you've got it mounted neatly, it's time to sew around it on a single needle machine, and yes, you want to stay as close to the edge as possible. Now, as far as the sticky out corners go, when you get to the corner, take something, I prefer a small flat-bladed screwdriver, and just push the excess material in and then sew over it to give you a nice finished edge. Once you've sewn all the way around, make sure you do your oversew, and you're then going to place an extra square of stitches about a 1/4 inch in from the original ones. This gives the patch the appearance of a French fell seam, and it is a pretty nice look for it. All that remains for us to do now is to pat ourselves on the back for how nice our work looks, and in all seriousness, for very little effort, you get a really good patch that'll protect your gear.